I'm alive. Hello, my name is Daniel. Welcome to the channel. And I just want to share with you today some of the items I've been reading lately. A lot of sickness has been running through the household, so I haven't been able to get to the videos I wanted to make recently. So if you tag me in something, I'm sorry. I still haven't gotten to that yet. But right now I've been reading quite a bit. While everyone's doing this whole March of the Mammoths thing, I've been kind of doing the opposite. But the plus side is I've been reading pretty much a book a day for a long stretch of time. But a lot of these I want to unload now, and the others I need to reshelf. I'm I'm feeling the compulsion to just reorganize everything, and so I'm going to talk about a stack of items just pretty briefly today, and then I can do that. But some of the things I've been reading lately. First one is just going to be a comic that is Conan the Barbarian, bound in black stone. This is from Titan Comics, who recently acquired the Conan license. Just wanted to check out what what the new comic is like, and I really like it. This is not digital like I normally would do for comic books. And that's kind of because I kind of want to collect Conan physically, and I'm really debating now that Titan Comics has the license to reprint a lot of the old Marvel comics from the original years, kind of like Marvel recently did like a whole stack of omnibuses of Conan the Barbarian and Savage Sword of Conan. This is the new Titan Comics version, but there was like an old black and white magazine that they did way back in the 70s, and then went through I think the 90s. There are about 8 omnibus volumes of that, at least in the Marvel version. I think that the Titan Comics version will be pretty much the same, but I'm kind of wanting them physically. Makes no sense because I don't have any space to put them, but I will make space. I will get rid of books because I really enjoyed this. And so I got this physically because I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start from the beginning. It'll be easier to collect as long as the comics are good. And so far, the comics are really good. This is, like I said, the first issue. We start with a little bit of a snag with the Nemedian Chronicles. This is something that, like, every Conan story begins with. And it starts, "Know, O Prince, that between the years when the oceans drank Atlantis and the gleaming cities, and the year of the rise of the sons of Arias, there was an age undreamed of, where shining kingdoms lay spread across the world like blue mantles beneath the stars," etc., etc. But a lot of people that I've seen on YouTube have pointed out that there's a typo here where they say "No, O Prince," like "O-H Prince," like "Oh Prince," like he spilled some milk on himself while they were talking to him. That's just sort of like how all these Conan stories begin, is where like someone's telling some prince about the history and stories of Conan the Barbarian. But OH is not how you do that. And I did double check things. Where did I put it? The with my Gardner's modern English usage. So I'm like, is that really a typo? Because they apparently they did it a lot in the later Marvel years. And so I looked up the difference between O and OH. And although the distinction isn't always observed, there is one. O, meaning the letter O, denotes either a wish or a classically stylized address. "Praise the Lord, O Jerusalem." Psalm 147, while OH expresses a range of emotions from sorrow to pain to shock to longing to momentary hesitation. Oh, you frightened me. So it's a typo. And we'll see if they correct it in the future. But beyond that, that's my real only nitpick on this volume. The art is amazing. I never really got to read a whole lot of the Dark Horse comics, but this seems much more akin to the classic Conan comics from the early Marvel years that I'm used to reading. If I knew artists, I would say the artist it reminds me of, but off the top of my head, I'm a really bad comic guy. But in this, Conan fights against a lot of zombies that are just roaming through the countryside. It's not like the infectious zombies. It's more of picked tribes that were transformed. But it's a really good story, and it has a little bit of sad moments to it, but it was really, really excellent. I'm still picking my way through the Savage Sword of Conan, which I'm torn on the art here because while it's highly detailed, there are moments where it's newsprint quality, so like there's going to be a little bit of smudging in it. This is where like the darker stories are supposed to be told, but also the sense of depth perception seems really odd. Like I feel like I'm this was drawn by like a very detail oriented Cyclops. Is the best way I can put it. As far as the story itself, I haven't finished it, so I can't say anything for sure. And that's just like the main Conan story. The Solomon Kane story is drawn really well, so it's just something I noticed, and this has gotten rave reviews most places I've seen, so maybe it's just a me problem. But yeah, like I feel like something is physically off when I'm reading this. Some uncanny valley kind of situation. Something that I was only supposed to read one book of. I'm working my way through the Great Book of Amber. This is 10 novels in the Chronicles of Amber. Uh, it's kind of did the whole multiversal story in fantasy before it became really popular in like modern superhero movies for right now. Like everything Marvel seems to be about a multiverse or timelines converging. This is a big fantasy story about a, a, a family of people who come from this land called Amber, which is like this city state that is like the center of the universe, and everything that radiates out from it is sort of a manifestation or a shadow of Amber. So this family has like the power to, you know, pierce that shadow and go into it and sort of morph into different realities that are slightly further and further away from the ideal that is Amber. This is mainly just a story about a family also who is trying to establish some sort of control, not quite in the same way as Game of Thrones, because there's only so many players who are trying to get control of the kingdom of Amber, but there's correlation there. It feels very different though. It's not like so much the high fantasy that you might be used to, but it's like a mixture of like our world with other worlds and going to fight against the courts of chaos. And originally I was just this month I was trying to follow a plan where I just read a book a month, and I was supposed to read The Sign of the Unicorn, which was actually probably the weakest book for me out of all of them, because it was mostly just an exposition dump, but like it helped clear things up. So it was a necessary book, I think. But like if I were to rate it, that one was kind of only like a 3 star. Uh, but then I felt compelled to just keep going, so I did. So my TBR to be damned, I read The Hand of Oberon, which sort of was pretty nonstop action. Uh, and again, but if I were to explain this, it would be spoiling the previous books. Honestly, I've discovered that the first 5 books, which is known as the Corwin cycle. Corwin is the name of the protagonist. Um, Really, this is just one big book. If it were printed today and not in the 70s, then this would have been published as 2 books. The first 5 novels of Amber are the Corwin cycle, and then the next 5 are the Merlin cycle. Merlin is the son of Corwin. And finally, I read The Courts of Chaos, which was epic. It was the best out of all 5, where Corwin is now trying to fight against the forces of chaos that he may or may not have unleashed earlier in the series, and all of Amber and therefore all of existence is in jeopardy. So things get really big fast in this novel. Also, like things become more surreal because he has to venture further and further away from the city of Amber. I don't know if that made any sense to you, but I do recommend picking it up if you're into fantasy. This was one of the inspirations for D&D in its earliest days. It's not high fantasy, so like it's more of an inspiration for the multiversal aspects of D&D that you see, where they go into different planes of existence using magical spells. I think that has more to do with it. And also in early D&D, there was a big distinction between law and chaos. So it's influential on the fantasy genre and on Dungeons and Dragons, which itself was hugely influential on the fantasy genre. So I recommend checking it out. I will probably end up reading the next 5 books like next month, because unless they like start going downhill, which I guess some people are of the opinion that the Merlin cycle is a weaker story than the Corwin cycle. We'll see. I also read The Sea Beast Takes a Lover by Michael Andreasen. Sorry if the name was incorrect. Andreasen, I think. Um, this is a short story collection that's mostly very surreal. There are a couple of exceptions. The first story really pulled me in, and it's called Our Fathers at Sea. It's where we're sort of brought into a universe where uh, the elderly are routinely crated up and dropped into the ocean when they get to a certain age, because that is just the way of things. And then we have sort of an emotional journey with that as the predicate. Um, it was really affecting, and I really liked it. But then I noticed something as we go through the story itself. The Sea Beast Takes a Lover is about these people on a ship who uh, it's very unusual, because this entire ship, and it's never really like the pictures on the cover and the alternate covers to this book indicate that it's like an old-fashioned ship, but that doesn't seem to be the case, because they have televisions and stuff. The ship is being sort of hugged and held in place by this giant kraken, and is slowly being drawn underwater, but over the course of months. And the crew is gone slightly insane. Apparently, there's these mer people who are just like floating around them, and they're also like cutting these tentacles and using it as food. Everyone's sort of cracking up and becoming weird. Also, there's this random like cannibal on board that they just mention and has not really much to do with the plot. And that's was my first indication that I think that most of these stories in this book um, are just the author's dreams that he transcribed onto paper and didn't put much more thought into. And as I kept going along, there were some stories that seemed more crafted, but the majority of these were these surreal experiences where things just happen, and he's trying to like pull an emotional response. You know how when you dream, you have like some really intense dreams where like you wake up and you're like, this is the most profound thing I've ever been through. Um, but then when you try to explain it to someone else, it sounds really stupid. That's kind of the feeling I got with this. I feel like he just had a journal next to his bed, and he's like, whenever he woke up from this drunken stupor, he would just write down the particulars, and then he would try to eke out like that emotional punch that you would feel um, as if you were dreaming. And I don't think it succeeds at that most of the time. There was a couple, like there was one story I know that was published in the New Yorker, and it has its own like Goodreads entry, and people seem to really like it. But like it was just the same of like, yeah, there's this dancing bear on a ball who can now talk, and sometimes he's just leading this other person away. And there's this king who's buying old amusement parks and is trying to like forget that his wife left him. He's eating old moldy hot dogs, and then he's like, "Oh, I have a stomach ache." Like there was some emotional heft to some of these stories. It wasn't like I didn't like this book, but I don't feel the need to keep it, because I don't think that the stories have a lot of staying power. Also, I think it was fairly obvious that a bunch of these stories were just added to add bulk to the collection, where they didn't really, excuse me, they didn't really do a whole lot for me. So it was slightly disappointing from where I started with this book, but yeah, it just felt like his dreams that he tried to transcribe and make into more than they were. So that'll be heading on its own. Some small books I read: Star Trek V, This is by James Blish. This is just a collection of Star Trek episodes. What do we have here? It was okay. It was fine, but like I remember some of the episodes a little more strongly because they had a much more of emotional heft when the full script was fleshed out and things were added to it. So it has Whom Gods Destroy, The Tholian Web, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, This Side of Paradise, Turnabout Intruder, Requiem for Methuselah, and The Way to Eden. And a lot of these stories have to do with like people finding their own paradise. So it was almost like a thematic thing, and I don't know if it was on purpose, but yeah, like I think it was This Side of Paradise is where like Spock um, has his emotions opened up by the spores of this weird, crazy plant, and basically all of the Enterprise mutinies and tries to like strand themselves on this planet, and Captain Kirk has to like get Spock angry enough because I guess the spores are killed by strong emotion of anger, and so that's when Captain Kirk is just telling Spock like, "You half breed nitwit, you're not wanted anywhere." And like in the episode, like they go like mano a mano, and Spock is about to kill Captain Kirk because their strength difference is so incredibly. I think what like Vulcans are like 4 or 5 times the strength of humans. So like he hits him with a metal bar and he just bends the bar and throws Kirk around. But one of the strongest aspects to that episode is that Spock is like having romantic relationship with this one human girl, and you don't really get that in the Blish adaptation at all. It like they mention it, but like it doesn't have that same heft. So it was just it was an okay adaptation for what it was. But I wouldn't go out of your way to to go get that collection. It's more of like the Blish Star Trek books are more of like a relic of the time. Like if you did not have access to these television episodes, like it's good to have so you can just like reminisce. But in this day and age, they're not really necessary. I also read On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. This is essentially an anti-Trump book that was put out pretty early on, if I remember correctly, into the Trump presidency. Uh, 2017. So yeah, within the first year of the Trump presidency, a lot of my friends on Goodreads gave this rave reviews. I think like this is almost like Timothy Snyder's attempt at being Thomas Paine. It's like a little print-on-demand pamphlet, really cheap, like $9.99. This was given to me by a friend who was actually quite nervous when the election happened. Um, uh, this book was okay. It's just basically 20 things you should be doing based historically on the tyrants of the past, like the Nazi Party, Stalin. Um, Things you can do to sort of fight against tyranny, like do not obey in advance, defend institutions, beware of the one-party state, etc., etc. Make eye contact and small talk, so like establishing real relationships with people. Uh, so almost like a little bit of a luddite in some areas where he's just like our digital um, interactions with each other aren't sufficient. Um, Maybe. My problem with a lot of this book is that obviously it's pandering to fear of things that I think, and this might get me in trouble, didn't really play out in the way that they were um, necessarily afraid of. Um, Also, a lot of these rules, that's what I'm going to call them, uh, don't really help you once there is a tyrant in place. This is almost like a preventative guide, but this was put out after someone was theoretically going to be a tyrant. I don't want to go on like any political stances. I think this book can work on its own. I didn't hate it, but I think it's of limited usefulness. This is no Common Sense by Thomas Paine. Um, it's a call to action, but those actions may have been a little bit too late. It was fine. If you want to check it out, it's worthwhile. A lot more people I know got more out of this than I did. Um, I don't know. It's okay. So that's on Tyranny. And lastly, for the project of banned books I'm trying to read that have been banned, we have one of the classics that is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, and I think this book was brilliant. This was a reread, but basically, it's different than 1984, but it has a lot of similar vibes to it. This is about a utopian society where we've stamped out. We've sort of emphasized pleasure, and that was the great method of controlling people. There's a lot about Pavlovian psychology, where if we just do this, or if we breed people this way, then they're going to react this way. So in this society, it starts off with like a tour of the breeding centers. No one reproduces sexually anymore. Everyone's sort of grown in a lab. They like donate their eggs, uteruses, and whatnot. And one of the things they do is they clone people by this like weird budding method where they take one like set of like embryos, and then we just have them split off over and over and over again, where you have like 80 twins, and then they sort of have this hierarchy where they try to make alpha plus and alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and epsilon. Epsilon are like the lowest end of society. They create this like hierarchy where we're going to manufacture people to be brilliant. Then we're gonna like add a little alcohol to like their womb to like dumb them down a little bit. And in some cases, when you get to the epsilons, who are like the elevator men of society, because every society needs some sort of hierarchy like that, we're just gonna like severely mentally retard them to the point where they're like sky, and they can barely function. And then on top of that, they spend a whole lot of time conditioning the next generations to behave certain ways. So like they use a lot of uh, sleep learning techniques where they just play what they consider to be like their morality system over and over again. Like, oh, I am so glad I am a beta, because alphas have to work so much harder, and we don't have to work as hard. But we don't want to associate with the gammas or the nasty epsilons, just that sort of thing. Where they just like create this hierarchy, and then nothing is done except for pleasure. They've invented this perfect drug called soma, which has all the like the benefits of alcohol and like LSD, because it in enough quantities it becomes hallucinogenic, where people take vacations, but none of the downsides. So it's like not giving you a hangover at the end of the day. So this entire society like um, breeds pretty much perfect conformity. But there are some characters in this who, like, there's one character who's like an alpha plus, who they suspect that based on his stature and his oddness, that maybe a little bit of alcohol got in his solution when it shouldn't have, because he's a super alpha plus. And so this man named Bernard is an outsider in this kind of community, where he's starting to have ideas that don't follow the conformity of this. And there are a few characters like that. And he starts to question, and he's just shunned by everyone else. Like, why don't you just take some soma and just, not worry about it? He's like, well, I don't want soma. And this is a society of free love, as long as you don't become like a parent, because you just need to abort that real quick. And so he wants to have relationships, like monogamous relationships with other characters, and they're like, that's weird. Why would you ever want that? That's so distasteful. It's really hard to unpack this book thoroughly without like just like writing down like an outline of everything that happens. But essentially, there are these reservations where people breed normally. Ugh. And so Bernard takes his prospective girlfriend, or what he wishes to become a girlfriend, and they go on one of these reservations just to see how the savages do it. And they discover that there's this one savage who is of fair complexion, and this is like in South America, I believe, where he stands out as someone who's not. And turns out that that savage was one of their own members of society. They visited this like reservation, and they got lost, and she was pregnant, and she gave birth naturally and became the mother of the savage. And he grew up being an outsider in his own community because his mother still had the values of like the privileged society, where she's like, oh, of course I'll sleep with everyone, and all the wives are like, oh no, you won't. And so she's hated, her son is hated. And so the main character Bernard discovers this savage boy, and brings him back to the civilized community, where he is just made into a spectacle. And just seeing how what we consider civilized is considered savage there, and vice versa. But what I liked about this book, that was very broad and quite a bad description, to be honest. But what I really liked about this book is I think it hews a little more closely to how people have been distracted in the modern day from the matters that we consider really important. In 1984, it was more of a force to like, we will control you through fear. And this one is like, well, we will control you through entertainment and make you not want to care. And we're we're sort of going to condition you in a way where you won't be inclined to care in the future, which is kind of, it's not really done so much by our governments per se, but corporations really do control how we they've really studied how we can be like sort of caught like, how you on your phone you like just doom scroll, you go on TikTok and you just go and like an hour goes by. That feels a lot closer to how we are controlled today, and what is sort of shown in this book than anything you'd see in 1984. So I just thought it was brilliantly written. It's a little less of a story than something like 1984, and I can see that being a barrier for some, because a lot of this book is just showing how this world works, and it has less to do with the characters, though they do have a lot of good moments. Um, it's more of like a look at this society, this utopia, and this is this is something that you can actually fear, and I think that it's brilliant. So that's it. I am currently reading Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. Um, Kind of got sidetracked a little bit just because I've been having like migraines lately, along with these sicknesses, and this is not a book you want to read when you're in a bad mood. But also, I've been reading a lot of periodicals, and I don't know why. I just felt compelled to do so. And I was buying magazines, and then I realized, oh, I'm an idiot. I can just go on the Libby app, and they have like them all through my library for free. So this, on top of like getting a New York Times subscription just to check it out, has been eating into a lot of my time. Though if it's still on my screen, no, it went away. The first thing I saw in the New York Times was like how the one of the Queer Eye for the Straight Guy co-creators says how you should organize your bookshelf, and it's just monstrous to me. It's like, we're gonna put all these curios and knickknacks on it. Okay, fair, because I do the same, even though this is a work in progress. It's really not meant for show yet, but like they're filling out individual cubbies with things, and like all the books need to be color coordinated, and some are going to be horizontal, and some are going to be vertical, and it just needs to be an expression of you. And all those silly books that you might want to have read, we're just gonna tuck those away inside cabinets with doors that close, because that doesn't match the aesthetic, and that's just like antithetical to everything I like about a bookshelf. So it's like, oh, I paid for this. This is insulting. But it's still it's still nice to like doom scroll on something that isn't Facebook. In the New York Times, at least I'm gonna get educated on something. So periodicals, Harper's magazine, and whatnot have been actually pretty interesting. So I'm going to continue doing that, though it might be at the expense of some of the books and getting through my 100 book challenge. We'll see how that goes. I had my one big book haul uh, that I allowed myself for the 100 book challenge. That's gone now. I can't do that again. If I do, then I've just failed. So we'll see how that goes. But that's it for me. It's been pretty good reading weeks so far, but things are slowing down again thanks to the magazine. So I will get you up to speed the next time I have something to say. Thank you. Bye.